And you're welcome back to The Pulse. Now, today is International Day to End Obstetric Fistula. If you don't know about the situation, don't worry. We'll have an expert from the Ghana Health Service to help us break it down for you. Just a little information, though. It is a hole in the birth canal caused by prolonged or obstructed labor in the absence of timely emergency cesarean section, which leaves women to leak urine and fecal matter. So before our conversation, here's Justice Beidu's feature looking at the health complication. Viewer discretion is advised.
Inside the local hospital in Boko, a cesarean session on a woman in desperate need. This hospital is located in one of the poorest parts of Ghana. A few years ago, such a surgery could not have been done here because the human resource and infrastructure to do it could not be found in such a remote location. Now, this is possible in faraway Boko, on the northeastern tip of Ghana's border with Burkina Faso. It goes to show how far the country's healthcare delivery has come. Dr. Clement Opon, an example of a dedicated health workforce offering his expertise where many his like would hardly go. Here, he makes more than 3 surgeries every day.
There are about 3 districts surrounding this municipality that does not have hospitals. So this serves as the main referral point for all maternal cases from these 3 regions. And sometimes we also get cases from the Boko West district, which is the Zebila area. So this is the main referral center for the communities or the district on the eastern parts of the Upper East region. We get a lot of referrals from these areas, and we are trying our best to cope with the pressure that comes with us. So that we don't have adequate hands on the ground. The doctors are very few because most of the doctors don't accept postings here. So Upper East has a high population of teenage pregnancies. Okay, I think somewhere in the other parts of the country, teenage pregnancies is seen like a child who has gone to do something. But here, these are married, wedded young girls who require babies. Okay, in my consulting room, I treat patients who are as young as 17, 18, and are still treating infertility, looking for babies. And once these patients are very young and they are carrying babies, labor and delivery is likely to be difficult. Normally, the patient we want to call them fistula survivors because there are 2 categories of people who suffer from delayed delivery. The first group die, and those who survive are those who actually get the fistula. So we normally tell them that they are fistula survivors. We are increasingly seeing increasing numbers of fistula cases when we started this. The unfortunate thing about fistula cases is that you don't expect the fistula patients to pick his bag and come to hospital. They will not do so because of the stigma attached to the disease, because they are leaking urine, they are leaking feces, they are smelling. Their social life is lost. They cannot go to church, they cannot go to the mosque, they cannot go to the market. They can't even join public transport with the purpose of coming to hospital.
This region already has one of the worst records of maternal mortality. Birth rates are high, many unsupervised. And for some of the women lucky to deliver alive, complications like obstetric fistula occur. At the OPD, some of the women who live with the horrors of fistula have come for their routine checkup. Hawa Halidu, married at 13. Zainabu Abdullahi, married at 14. Shehu Lar, married at 15. And the list goes on and on. They are comforted by Cynthia Sinawisi, herself a survivor of fistula, helping other victims to come out.
I lived with it for 2 years, 2 months.
Tell me how it was like for you.
It was like hell. One, you can't sleep well in the night. You can't sleep well. Because when you sleep, you by all means be wet. You have to get up and change. You can't go anywhere. You can't mix. You can't be with your friends and a whole lot.
Well, such a chilling account there, but imagine that there are 13,000 of these kind of cases across the country. That's according to a recent report by UNFPA. So how do we deal with this? Joining us now is obstetrician, gynecologist, and fistula surgeon at the Kolubu Teaching Hospital, Dr. Gabriel Ganyaglo. He is also a member of the Fistula Task Force team. Thank you, Doc, for your time. So we've seen the problem as highlighted in that documentary by my colleague, Justice Bedo. What's the situation now as we speak? Would you say that the trend is gradually going down?
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and good afternoon to your viewers. Indeed, it is very difficult to say that the situation is letting up or reducing. As you can see from that clip with Dr. Clement Opong in Boko, the circumstances causing fistula have not changed much. There's still very childhood marriages still continue. People are married off in some cultures in their teens. Access to emergency obstetric services is still challenging in some communities. Road networks are not motorable all year round in some places. And so, yes, the circumstances causing fistula have largely remained unchanged. So it's very difficult to say that the situation is improving. We still estimate that we have about 1,300 new cases occurring every year. The number living with fistula, unfortunately, we do not know, because like you mentioned rightly, the patients don't walk into the hospitals for you to count them as cases. So we still think that we have a significant number of people living with obstetric fistula in Ghana.
And the point is, what's the major factor accounting for this? Some reports have pointed to poverty as one critical factor, which is making, for instance, treatment of the case itself a difficulty for many more women in Ghana.
You are spot on. It tends to be more prevalent in the very poor areas of the country, and rural areas in particular are vulnerable to fistula. Sometimes it is for the very simple reason of money for transportation to go to hospital when labor begins. So in the very poor areas, the woman cannot find the money to even come to that natal clinic during the pregnancy, and they have no clue. I would say that the major cause is the lack of education among our communities and the rural folks. They do not know what causes fistula. They do not understand that when labor becomes prolonged and is obstructed, the fistula becomes a natural outcome if the woman doesn't die. So whilst the labor is obstructed, they attribute it to ancestral spirits, they attribute it to infidelity on the part of the woman. They simply do not understand that it's probably because the baby came in too soon when the woman was actually still growing and hadn't finished growing. They do not appreciate that some babies do not turn the way they should turn normally for the babies to come out. Some of them will go and deliver with the birth attendant or the oldest woman in the community. Also because they may be worried about what they will eat if they come to deliver in the hospital. So it's education, number one, and I think it's the lack of information to our rural folks and the lack of understanding of what really causes fistula. Because 9 out of 10 fistulas in Ghana are caused by prolonged obstructed labor.
And Doc, let's be fair. Let's not assume that even those within the urbanized areas have a full appreciation of what the condition itself is. So this is perhaps a good time for you to educate us on this. When you talk about fistula, obstetric fistula, what's the condition about and how complicated can it get?
Yeah, when it comes to fistula, we define three parameters: the passenger, who is the baby, the power, which is the uterine contraction, and the passage, which is the birth canal. All three must be in normal relationship for the baby to come out normally. So if it turns out that the passage is smaller than the passenger, in other words, the woman hasn't finished growing and the pelvis is small, and the baby is big, then that baby naturally cannot come through the birth canal. So it will get stuck at the point. When that happens, it's important to have an emergency cesarean section to remove the baby. So that is where all the problems with fistula begin, because when the labor is obstructed, in many places, some of the women are delivering in spiritual homes. There's no concept of it will not come, so let's go to hospital. The understanding is that the gods have not permitted the passage yet. So they keep doing all sorts of things. And that is fundamentally what causes fistula. So even if you live in Accra and the baby is bigger than the birth canal can accommodate and it's stuck, and you don't get access to emergency cesarean section in a timely fashion, then it is likely you'll be in Accra and still develop fistula. So yes, your point is spot on.
And the concern now is about the solution. Some say we need policy intervention. I mean, how adequate is that within the public sector? Are there some interventions, some subventions from government that, of course, public hospitals receive, which would make it easier for persons suffering this condition to get help?
Yes, I think prevention is the key, and it comes at various levels. You mentioned policy intervention, that would be at probably the government level. But as the theme for this year says, invest in quality healthcare, empower communities, meaning that we have to make sure that our communities are educated on good antenatal or the requirements of antenatal care, and they must be delivered by a skilled birth attendant. If you leave out the community, if they manage to get into the hospital, we have the infrastructure that is ready and the necessary manpower to deliver a safe emergency cesarean section in a timely fashion. That is the focus of the theme for this year. Invest in quality healthcare and empower communities. And these two parameters, once they are addressed, is likely to prevent obstetric fistula from occurring, and we will be able then to manage to look after those who are already having fistula. For those already with fistula, treatment is available, mainly surgical. There are surgeons around the country, there are surgeons in regional hospitals that can do the fistula repairs. Unfortunately, due to stigma, due to order of the patients and the lack of the necessary resources, we are unable to bring patients suffering from fistula to health centers for the needed surgical repair. And yet, when some get to the hospitals in the obstructed labor state, there are still delays in the health facilities. So the theme for this year is calling on all of us to invest in quality healthcare and empower the communities. If the traditional leader understands that marrying the girls too soon will lead to fistula, he may be forced to take another look and put the girls in the classroom instead. If they understand that delivering at home is unsafe, they may rather want to deliver in a hospital. And if they know that the journey to the hospital in the time of labor is treacherous and they will not have the resources to go, they may start saving during the first months of the pregnancy. So everybody's responsibility to help us to and eliminate.
And it's gratifying to know that you're doing the public education now, but I mean, we need to face it, we're still in that digital age, which means that some may be getting their information from social media, which entirely may not be accurate. So if there's something that women have to disabuse their minds on this condition, what will that be?
Well, it is to encourage all women to understand that it is not the fault of the patient that she has fistula. Many blame the patient, and so they shun the patient. We should understand that despite the smell of urine and feces when these women are leaking, they need help. They need our support. They need our empathy. So please, let's not just worsen their situation because they're already suffering mentally and then they don't have the money. So please, let's all understand that it's not a fault of the women. It's a failure of the healthcare system, if we have to put it that way. So let's all lend our shoulders to the wheel. And please, let's understand that obstructed labor is what causes fistula and not ancestral spirits, and it's not a curse.
I'm grateful, Dr. Ganyaglo. Thank you for joining us here on The Pulse. Well, the story of the visually impaired veteran actor cut off from power supply is obviously one issue that's on our focus here on The Pulse. When we return, of course, we'll talk all about that. Please stay. We'll return shortly. And you're welcome back. Now, the story of the visually impaired veteran actor cut off from power supply for over 5 years, for many years, William Addo, dazzled on our screens with his exquisite acting skills. It brought him to fame and acclaim, but all that fizzled out when he suddenly became visually impaired. He moved out of the limelight into obscurity in his hometown, Tefle. Well, his woes worsened when the Electricity Company of Ghana cut him off the national grid because of outstanding debt. In an interview, he explained he has been living in the dark for over 5 years.
Grandma will say from the way. I mean, even when you were strong on your 2 feet and going about and, knocking on doors that could open, but nobody cares. When Bakma interviewed me and wrote the story on me, I made a passionate appeal to the president of the land to come to my aid and things like that. Nobody has ever, since that time. So please, all I need is that electricity be restored to me here. Because what happened was that there was a time that they said they were changing meters and things like that. They were introducing some new meters. And then it went, when they changed it, for nearly a year or two, no bill was coming for us to know. Then all of a sudden, the bill that came was about close to 5,000 cedis.